President Donald Trump is the perfect example of what happens when you try to be a bully. He only does it from a position of power, as he has famously said, "I have all the cards, you don't have any cards." Let's take a look at his cards and what might happen if he continues to abuse his power to bully other nations. What are his cards? Right now, he has the dollar as the reserve currency, the world's most powerful military, ability to sanction countries, use tariffs, and relationship with trading partners. The dollar's reserve status has allowed the United States to use money on credit. This credit allows the US to spend a lot more than it produces. Its citizens borrow a lot more than it saves. The US dollar reserve status also finances its mighty military. When Donald Trump doesn't feel like using the US military, he uses the US dollar's global reserve currency status to sanction other countries, to restrict or remove access to money and confiscate reserves. Examples include confiscating $300 billion worth of Russian sovereign assets held in the US, and blocking access to $7 billion that the Afghan central bank had deposited into the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Trump is tariffing the rest of the world, claiming that the US is always in a trade deficit. But the US doesn't produce very much outside of oil, compared to the manufacturing nations of the world. He tariffed everyone, even the US's closest and longest allies. As Peter Schiff says, the US's consumer and debt-fueled economy only works because the rest of the world supplies and finances it. President Trump's tariffs on the world are saying the country should pay for the privilege of providing the US with the goods that it can't produce. Although the tariffs fall on American consumers, it is an inconvenience to the foreign producers. This will make it more expensive for the sellers, and they will look for alternative markets. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney lit a match at Davos during the World Economic Forum, and is now leading a bunch of middle countries in trade talks to reduce dependency on the US, and not be subject to President Trump's bullying tactics. Japan, a long-standing ally of the US, tried to negotiate with President Trump on tariffs initially. But even the normally patient and polite Japan complained that it was impossible to reason with President Trump as he couldn't agree on the foundations of trade reasoning. President Trump's strategic bullying, or art of the deal tactics as he calls it, is pushing the closest and most loyal trading partners such as Canada, Mexico, and Japan away. China, recognizing the opportunity, is challenging the US dollar reserve currency by having the yuan as a means of trade for oil and general goods within its trading partners. There have been concerns that the US dollar value will continue to be reduced due to money printing. The US has said in the past that the US dollar is backed by the US military. I would argue that it's the other way around. The US military is financed by the world because the US dollar is the reserve currency. Without the reserve dollar status, the dollar could lose its value very quickly and risk the funding of its very expensive military. Trump claims the US has all the cards because Americans buy and consume everything. He has it backwards. It's the producers who are in control. They make all the stuff. Consuming is an after benefit of producing. Anyone can consume. China and other countries are perfectly capable of consuming their products without the US. But the US cannot consume when it is not produced. Decades of outsourcing manufacturing has hollowed out the US production to the point where it can't produce. Bullying isn't free. It's only beneficial in the short term. By aggressively playing every card in his hand to win a temporary deal, Trump is effectively burning the deck. Bullying works in the short term because it relies on shock and awe. But in the long term, it creates isolation. From Mark Carney's trade talks in Davos to Japan's quiet pivot toward regional autonomy, the world is moving on. Trump is asking European allies, who he insulted and threatened financially and physically for a year, to assist with the war in Iran, specifically with reopening the Strait of Hormuz. As of recording, every country has said no or ignored the request. In the end, the biggest consequence for a bully isn't just a loss of power. It's also the silence of former friends. When you spend years telling everyone they need you more than you need them, you shouldn't be surprised when they finally find a way to prove you wrong.